Hello, everybody. How are you? Hi, Steve Gonzo. Hi, Dolores Pierce. Russ. I'd like to dive into learning some Mandarin Chinese on my Corona time. Ambitious. There goes my camera. I'll have to restart it. Well, that was easy. Okay, so I'm back. I guess not quite. There's a little delay, but I am back. It'll just take a little while to show. There we go. Oh, now I'm off again. So there we go. It'll settle down in a little while. There it is again. Steve says, say something. Okay, I'm saying something. And Teresa says, oh, Lordy, I'm starting to find myself amusing. Way too many days in isolation. Oh, all are well. So far, so good, but it has finally reached our rural city. This is most annoying, but hopefully it will now settle down. Bear with me, please. Yay, my sound has been restored. Who's your cameraman? That's the problem. I don't have a cameraman. I have a camera. I have a camera, but not a cameraman. I don't have a camera lady either. Sorry. Whoops, where did you go? I left and now I'm back. I think I'm back. You should be able to see me by now. How's the sound, by the way? Okay, I've entitled this Straws in the Wind. What is the emerging pattern? First, I'd like to get to the straws, and then we'll get to the emerging pattern. So here we go. Let me share the screen. And we'll check out some of the news. This is really a leftover from yesterday that I thought I'd be able to handle yesterday, but time was fleeting yesterday, so I never got to it, but it's still one of the straws. Okay, it's an article that appeared in Common Dreams on March 31st, and the title of it, it's by Jake Johnson. The title of it is Fed Economists Warn U.S. Unemployment Rate Could Soon Reach 32%. During the Great Depression, yes, back in the 1930s, it peaked at 25%. Yes, I think to be precise, it was 24.9%, but that's close enough. Economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis are warning that if the current rate of U.S. job losses continues, so note, this is a Fed estimate, the country's unemployment rate could reach a staggering 32.1% by the end of June, as the coronavirus pandemic-induced downturn sparks mass layoffs across the nation. So, the person who did this estimate is one Miguel Faria y Castro, an economist with the St. Louis Fed. And he wrote last week that 47 million more workers could lose their jobs by the end of the second quarter of 2020, bringing the total number of unemployed people in the U.S. to 52.8 million. Suddenly, Donald Trump's 3.5% unemployment is totally gone. 30% of the labor force will have been added to it. Instead of 6 million people unemployed or 5.5 million unemployed, there will be 52.8 million, nearly 53 million people unemployed, according to the Fed. If things don't change, if the laws don't change, if something is not introduced to employ those people. As CNBC noted, that number would be more than 3 times worse than the peak of the Great Recession in terms of the number of people unemployed, of course, but the population is far larger, so it's only a little more than twice as much, right? Or just about twice as much, I should say, at least in terms of the rate. These projections are even worse than St. Louis Fed President Mr. Bullard, James Bullard's much publicized estimate of 30% unemployment, said CNBC. They reflect the high nature of at-risk jobs that ultimately could be lost. So he says, that is Faria y Castro says, Quote, but this is a rather unique shock that is unlike any other experienced by the U.S. economy in the last 100 years. A unique shock. Very, very true. So Public Citizen was tweeting about it. HuffPost senior reporter Zach Carter, who's not very senior really when it comes to age. He has been with the HuffPost for a long time now, though. I wonder if he's in his 30s yet. He may be. But anyway, he says, it remains simply incredible that Congress is not even in town during a crisis of this magnitude, unquote. An astonishing bipartisan failure of government, Carter said. It remains simply incredible that Congress is not even in town during a crisis of this magnitude. Yes, he's right, quite right, of course. And Eric Levitz, CNBC, says, cool, cool, cool. Economists of the Federal Reserve. Again, then he goes into the projection of 47 million more people unemployed and an unemployment rate at 32.1%. What's cool about that? That's an absolutely freezing economy. It's not just a cool economy. And last time I looked, it's not cool either from the other point of view of cool. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, 3.3 million people filed jobless claims, shattering the previous record of 695,000 set in 1982. And of course, we're expecting to hear any day now about the jobless claims for last week, and I think most people expect it to be higher. Pictet Wealth Management has said that new jobless claims could be as high as 6.5 million, while Goldman Sachs, to those who insist on being prim and proper, has estimated 5.25 million. And Eric Levitz wrote in New York Magazine on Monday that while the St. Louis Fed's projection is just a rough estimate, there's reason to think its catastrophic prediction is in the ballpark, the right ballpark. Quote, it's hard not to suspect that most every part of our economic life is going to get worse before it gets better. Of course, barring intervention of the federal government. On the other hand, we can't have any intervention that would stop this from happening without the Senate in session. Where is the Senate? People were asking last week, where is Joe Biden? Where is Joe Biden? Where is Joe Biden? This week, the question has to be, where is the Senate? Where is the Senate? Where is the Senate? If 6.5 million people are shown to be newly unemployed and 10 million over the last 2 weeks, where is the Senate? So, this brings up a third piece, a third straw in the wind. And let me share the screen for this one. As the coronavirus spreads, polls show nearly 60% in the United States believe political system is designed solely to serve the rich and the powerful. Solely to serve the rich and the powerful. And here is the The article by Julia Conley, Common Dream, says as millions of Americans await I'm sorry. I must be sharing the wrong thing. Ah, yes. I am sharing the wrong thing. Let's see if I'm still sharing it. There it is. Poll shows nearly 60% in the U.S. believe political system designed solely to serve the rich, okay, and the powerful. And this is according to new polling that was out just today, backdrop by the continuous coronavirus outbreak. And that shows that most of the country believes the U.S. political system works only for the wealthy and elite rather than for working people. So people are getting it. This is a survey of 1,002 Americans taken by the Hill Harris X poll. 57% said they believe the political system serves the interests of the wealthy and the powerful, versus 32% who said it works for all Americans. Low-income Americans are more likely than people who are well off financially to say the system works for wealthy insiders. 61% to 55%. Women were 12% more likely than men, and Democratic and Independent voters were more likely than Republicans to say the U.S. government is designed to serve the elites. Republicans were the only subgroup in which a majority of respondents said the system works for everyone. The poll, which had a margin of error of 3.1 percentage points, was taken between March 22nd and March 23rd. It's April 1st already, right? As of April 1st, don't you think these numbers would be even higher after what's happened in the last week? It was taken between March 22nd and March 23rd as lawmakers debated a relief package amid the coronavirus pandemic. The package contained a $4.5 trillion slush fund for powerful corporations, while providing a one-time payment of $1,200 for a portion of working Americans and an expansion of some unemployment benefits. Of course, this underestimates the size of the expansion of unemployment benefits, which is pretty significant in various ways. But what it also neglects, of course, simply due to the timing of the poll, is that that bill hadn't been passed yet. And it wasn't clear to people that the package contained a $4.5 trillion slush fund for powerful corporations. But now that news has been spreading to the public very rapidly, as the Democrats pointed out, since they were dissatisfied with the bill. Okay, and many of them voted for it, supposedly under protest. So they're now talking to their constituents, pointing out they were not for it, pointing out there is a $4.5 trillion slush fund for powerful corporations, while they're only giving people a pittance of $1,200 for working Americans. Trump signed the legislative package days later. The bill also includes billions of dollars in loans for major corporations, such as Boeing, while demanding little to no meaningful oversight by Congress of the Treasury Department's distribution of funds, which, by the way, Trump has said he's not going to adhere to anyway. He's not going to allow the oversight, he said. So that's, of course, going to become particularly clear to people also that he's not allowing the oversight, that it's a slush fund, that this is in addition to what was given to Boeing, and that it's for the powerful corporations. What if that poll was taken again? What if that poll was taken on April 4th and 5th? What would the result be on April 8th? Would it still be 61 to 55 or only 57%? Or would it now be higher, or would it then be higher by 10 more points? President Donald Trump signed a legislation. Okay. Early in March, the Democratic-led House pushed through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which included paid sick leave only for companies with fewer than 500 employees. So these large corporations don't have to provide paid sick leave. And here's Amazon. Strikes are going on at Amazon right now, in part because they don't provide paid sick leave, and they don't have to do it under the bailout bill that was just passed by the Republicans and by the Democrats and signed happily by Donald Trump. No paid sick leave for Amazon employees. No paid sick leave for Facebook employees. No paid sick leave for Google employees. No paid sick leave for Walmart employees. Medicare for All proponents in March noted the single-payer healthcare system could have protected millions of Americans from losing their health coverage as businesses laid off and furloughed employees, which of course they're also doing at the large corporations. They're furloughing and laying off employees as the disease spreads. As Common Dreams reported, former Vice President Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential primary frontrunner, insisted Medicare for All would not have improved outcomes for Americans as the virus spread across the country. There he is, doubling down on his opposition to Medicare for All. What happens when people who are being treated for the coronavirus right now and who are laid off and who are furloughed start getting those $20,000 bills, $50,000 bills, $70,000 bills, surprise billings? What's going to happen then? What are those people going to think of Joe Biden and his opposition to Medicare for All? He can insist that it would not improve their outcomes, but of course part of their outcomes is the bills they're going to owe and the bankruptcies they're going to suffer and the divorces they may have to suffer and the mortgage foreclosures they may have to suffer. Those are part of their outcomes, Joe baby. Those would be helped by Medicare for All. No premiums, no copays, and no deductibles, wouldn't they be? I don't even have to argue about the medical outcomes being improved by that. They most probably would be. But why even argue? They're not all the outcomes. Politico on Tuesday published an article describing the coronavirus pandemic as an equalizer, forcing wealthy and low-income Americans to struggle alongside one another in the midst of medical supply and coronavirus test shortages. But while the virus itself does not discriminate according to wealth, critics on social media said, the U.S. political system has placed low-income workers and other marginalized people at greater risk of danger. Of course, because what happens when they cannot afford their copays? What happens when they have to choose between the copays and their rent? No. Or food, Bonnie says, or food. Everybody's not in the same boat. There are private hospitals, there are public hospitals. Yes. Many things in the hospitals may be the same, but the financial outcomes are not the same. The security outcomes are not the same. Even the quality of care, let's face it, is not exactly the same. How about the uninsured who can't afford a good policy under the ACA? Are the outcomes going to be the same for them? How come those people who choose to stay at home because they can't afford to pay what they know they're going to have to pay under the ACA? So they just stay at home and they ride it out and they die at home. Are the outcomes the same for them, Joe Biden? Actually, the pandemic is showing how unequal our society is, author and law professor Dorothy Roberts tweeted in response to the article. It also puts people of color, poor, low income, disabled, incarcerated, unhoused, and undocumented people at greater risk. Unquote. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It surely does. So, will this poll be repeated next week to see if only 60% in the U.S. believe the political system is designed solely to serve the rich and the powerful? Will that happen? Will we see that? I don't know. I hope you're sharing this. I hope you're sharing this. I think this is a good one. I hope you're sharing for me. I hope so. Anyway, next, guess what? More meanness. Outright meanness. From whom? From our wonderful president, Donald J. Trump. Specifically, Trump throws up outrageous roadblock for seniors. This is also from Common Dreams. People with disabilities in need of $1,200 relief checks. This is by Jake Johnson and was, I believe, today, wasn't it? Yes, Wednesday, April 1st. As millions of Americans await the $1,200 cash payments authorized by the latest corona stimulus package, experts and progressive advocates are condemning a move by the Trump administration which would force millions of seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities to jump through unnecessary hoops to receive money they're entitled to under the law. The IRS issued guidance earlier this week announcing people who do not typically file a tax return, a group that includes millions of Social Security recipients and low-income Americans, quote, will need to file a simple tax return to receive an economic impact payment, unquote. So just in my building today, one of my compatriots here walked into the office of our concierge and was asking her for some information because what she wanted to do was to file a simple 1040 short form quickly so she could get her data into the Federal Reserve, into the Treasury Department, the Internal Revenue Service, so that she could quickly receive her $1,200 cash payments because she hadn't filed her 2019 taxes yet. And she doesn't even think she filed 2018 taxes because most of the time she doesn't have to file a tax return. So the concierge was saying, okay, she'll do everything she can to help her. But of course, this lady, who I believe is in her 80s now, I'm not certain, I don't know her age, but I believe she's in her 80s. She's stuck. She needs the $1,200, and she knows she can't get it from the IRS. So now she's running to file a tax return that in the normal course of events she wouldn't even have to file. So she's looking to jump through that hoop. And so Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works, said, quote, "This is outrageous. The $1,200 payments could easily be added automatically to the benefits these people receive every month. Instead, the Trump administration is throwing up an unnecessary barrier that will make it harder for seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans to get the payments they desperately need. In the middle of a pandemic to which they are most vulnerable, the groups can't afford any delay," unquote. Altman noted that the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act explicitly gives the Treasury Department authority to use Social Security Administration data already on file to distribute the one-time payments to those who did not file a tax return in 2018 or 2019. In other words, the authority was given to the Treasury Department to remove this problem for people like my neighbor who did not file a tax return in 2018 or 2019. And now Nancy Altman is lobbying in favor of people like my neighbors here so they can get their $1,200 cash payment, which is little enough, of course, under the circumstances. Chuck Marr, Senior Director of Federal Tax Policy at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, urged the Treasury Department to, quote, to aggressively use that authority, unquote, to ensure that seniors and other vulnerable people don't fall through the cracks. Requiring seniors and people with disabilities who receive Form SSA 1099, the annual Social Security benefit statement, to file a tax return is unnecessary, Marr wrote in a blog post on Tuesday. Quote, "The federal government has all of the information it needs, likely more than 15 million Social Security recipients who currently don't file tax returns and aren't otherwise required to do so would have to file if Treasury doesn't use its authority to get those people payments automatically." Yes, the information of these people is on file with Social Security and could be disclosed to the Treasury Department. HuffPost's Arthur Delaney reported Tuesday that what the IRS described as a simple tax return is anything but simple to actually file, particularly at a time when volunteer tax clinics that help Americans navigate the process are closed due to the coronavirus outbreak. Of course, thinking about something like this is beyond the experience and capacity of Donald J. Trump and Mr. Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury. As Delaney wrote, theoretically, quote, "Theoretically, any low-income household should be able to file its taxes online for free. Here is the IRS.gov page with links to approved free services. But new filers trying to get rebate payments through the free online process may have some problems. One person in Indiana who said their only income is disability benefits said the free online tax software wouldn't allow them to file online or enter bank account information. The person who requested anonymity had received too little in disability benefits to owe federal tax, and because they had no earned income, wouldn't receive a normal refund. So the filing software said they weren't eligible to file online. I created a TurboTax account and tried to make a dummy return for a single person with no earned income. The software said that because my Form 1040 would have zeros on lines for income tax credits and payments, that my federal return was ineligible for e-filing according to IRS rules. After publishing his story, Delaney tweeted that he received a dozen emails overnight from seniors on Social Security unable to file taxes online because the tax prep software won't let them, apparently due to their lack of earned income and tax liability. He said this is a problem, and he tweeted that out. In a statement Tuesday, in the wake of the IRS guidance, House Ways and Means Chairman, Representative Richie Neal, Democrat of Massachusetts, said he and other Dems in Congress, quote, have been inundated with calls from concerned senior citizens regarding their ability to receive the economic impact payments Congress included in the CARES Act, unquote. Okay, I'm not going to go further with this. Suffice it to say the Democrats are pressuring to get the Republicans to heal this particular breach, okay, this particular problem, which was not anticipated by the Republicans because, of course, they evidently don't have any relatives who are over 70 and need their $1,200. They can always borrow it from the congressman, right? From the senators. But that's not really the point. The point is, we know it's bureaucratic malpractice for the Treasury not to use the Social Security information to get these people their funds. But more important, from the Republicans' own point of view, it is political malpractice. Because who do seniors predominantly vote for? Who do a majority of seniors actually vote for? They generally vote for the Republicans. In this coming election, most probably a majority of them are going to vote for Donald Trump. Okay, and by the way, I have to remind you as well that in the normal course of events, even though Joe Biden is more popular than Bernie Sanders, with this particular group, okay, of people, most probably Donald Trump is more popular than Joe Biden with this particular group, okay, of people. So Joe Biden might not be getting any more votes from seniors than Bernie Sanders would be getting from seniors. So how much more relatively unelectable would that normally make Joe Biden? But Republican malpractice, that is political malpractice, to the rescue, because since the Republicans don't really care about the old people, who for a very mysterious reason still continue to vote for them, they are happy to have this particular political malpractice be the order of the day right now. This meanness be the order of the day right now. I wonder what they'll think when they realize that it could cost them the vote of seniors. Because, I'll tell you, nothing makes a senior so angry as when the government doesn't give them what the government owes them on time from their point of view. They're not going to be happy even with Mr. Mnuchin's 3 weeks. If the check finally shows up in 3 to 4 months, they're going to be angry. And when November comes around, they're going to remember that their check was held up for 4 months. I mean, hell, Bonnie and I are going to remember it. The government owes us $2,400. if it comes in 4 months from now, because I have no idea whether I'm on file with the IRS or not. I should be. After all, I file stuff. My camera's gone out again, so I'm going to have to get that up. But if I get that in 4 months, that's a considerable piece of change for me. I'm going to be very unhappy about that, won't I? I suspect I will. And I'm going to be really angry at the Republicans who had the authority to make sure the information that I have on file at Social Security wasn't taken into account in getting me that check. I'm going to be real angry about that. Another straw in the wind. This one related to Medicare for All. There's a new poll. This is also from Common Dreams. It showed that support for Medicare for All surged to a 9-month high in a new poll after the coronavirus exposes the horrors of private health insurance. This is by Jake Johnson and came out also today. I guess it was a landmark day today for various straws in the wind. Support for Medicare for All among U.S. voters have reached a 9-month high in a Morning Consult tracking poll as the deadly and ongoing coronavirus pandemic lays bare the horrors and systemic inefficiencies of America's profit-driven healthcare system. The survey, which is linked to here, and is a PDF, is reported, in a PDF released on Wednesday, found 55% of U.S. voters support Medicare for All, a 9-point jump since February. That's 55% in the Morning Consult on the tracking poll, which, as I recall, is not worded in a particularly friendly way to Medicare for All. So in some other polls, it would be way above 55%. It would be more like 65%. Anyway, this represents a 9-point jump since February, while support for Medicare for All is highest among the Democratic voters at 75%. There's also a majority of independents, 52%, who also support the policy, along with 31%, of the Republicans. Support for Medicare for All grew among the people in the $50,000 to $100,000 income bracket, voters between 45 and 54 years old, and black voters by roughly 10 points each. With the discussion of enacting a universal healthcare system in the United States intensifying, and now I'm quoting from Yusra Murad of the Morning Consult, who noted that 43% of voters say they're more likely to support reforms to grant all Americans health insurance from the government because of the coronavirus outbreak. Notably, that support does not include the front runner in the Democratic presidential primary, former Vice President Joe Biden. Biden on Monday doubled down on his opposition to Medicare for All, telling MSNBC that single-payer health care would not solve the coronavirus crisis. We've already gone over this, a little bit earlier, but Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan would provide everyone in the U.S. with comprehensive health care for free at the point of service and virtually eliminate the private insurance system, which has left 80 million Americans uninsured or underinsured, a number that is rising rapidly as millions lose their jobs due to the coronavirus outbreak. By the way, if it's true that 47 million more people are going to lose their job, we're going to talk about 127 million Americans uninsured or underinsured by the end of June. What is that going to do to support for Medicare for All and for Bernie Sanders? You wonder why Bernie Sanders is still in the race? Because, as some have said, reality is now endorsing Bernie Sanders. Quote, how can it be that we spend 18% of our GDP on health care, more than any other country on earth, but still lack the beds, masks, ventilators, gowns, gloves, and test kits, and I might add also the CPAP kits for helping people to breathe? We need to adequately respond to this crisis, Sanders asked in a tweet on Wednesday. And then he added, quote, we must transform our dysfunctional healthcare system, unquote. Yay, Bernie. He said it again, and he'll say it again, and he'll say it again, and he'll have many chances to say it before the end of June, an increasing number of chances before the end of June, because the arc of justice is bending towards Bernie Sanders. Yes, it is. One more straw in the wind. This one's an article from Truthout. It's by William Rivers Pitt. And I think you've got it. Yep, I think you've got it on your screens right now, with me on the side. There's a picture of the Donald speaking during the daily briefing on COVID-19 in the Brady briefing room at the White House on March 31st. And this article by William Rivers Pitt today starts off with a quote from Bob Dylan, whose name is actually Zimmerman, but who changed it to Dylan in honor of Dylan Thomas. But even the President of the United States sometimes must have to stand but naked. I don't want to see that sight. Let it be noted at long last that on the final day of March in the year 2020, the 45th President of the United States finally told the truth. Not all of the truth, or even most of the truth, but enough truth, nonetheless, to stop the presses in dramatic fashion. I thought that was a well-crafted sentence by William Rivers Pitt. I really like the way he writes. Quote, I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead, unquote. A somber Donald Trump said at what has been until yesterday another useless White House COVID-19 briefing. Quote again, we're going to go through a very tough 2 weeks, and then hopefully, as the experts are predicting, you're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel. But this is going to be very painful, a very, very painful 2 weeks, unquote. And professional Trump watchers, hand raised, says the author, were genuinely astonished at his change in demeanor. He seemed to my eye anyway to be some half-baked incarnation of Ebenezer Scrooge after the ghost of Christmas yet to come slapped him on the ass. Quote, I've never seen President Trump like this, said CNN's Jim Acosta. Continuing the quote, he is scared right now. This was a different Donald Trump tonight. I think he gets it, unquote. I think he may get that if between 100 and 250,000 Americans really die from this crisis on his watch, that he won't have a ghost of a chance of getting elected in November. Because people are going to put it down to him. I don't know if it's going to benefit Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is going to have a hard time showing that the man who doesn't want to pass the Medicare for All bill would have been able to materially improve the outcome. But the chief advisors to Donald Trump are now saying that if we do everything right, we might get the death toll down to between 100,000 and 250,000. They're not talking about 10,000 dead anymore, or even 20,000 dead, or even 45,000 dead, 45,000 more than we have right now due to lack of insurance. And William Rivers Pitt says, well, don't get too far over your skis there, Jim. The Donald is still the Donald, end quote. You're going to start seeing some real light at the end of the tunnel, unquote, after 2 weeks is galvanized, steel-reinforced bullshit. The reason President Trump looked like a man who stared into the abyss yesterday is because he did precisely that. And finally, he got the damned message. Quote, the grim-faced president who appeared in the White House briefing room for more than 2 months on Tuesday evening beside charts showing death projections of fallacious proportions was coming to grips with a reality he had long refused to accept, unquote, reports the New York Times. And quote again, at a minimum, the charts predicted that 100,000 to 240,000 Americans would die, and only if the nation abided by stringent social restrictions that would choke the economy and impoverish millions, unquote. 250,000 people could die of COVID-19, even if we do everything right, which we aren't. And many are saying that number is optimistic. Some projections place the potential death toll in the U.S. at over 2 million people. Also, the profiteers are on the case. And there is flat-out mayhem in the medical supply chain. Whatever this is right now, it is not bad, not really, not yet. Bad is very much yet to come. Not one single part of this bill will be over in 2 weeks. Not one single part of this will be over in 2 weeks. In fact, it will be Trump's most devout supporters who will begin to experience the wrath of this thing within the arc of that 2-week timeline. Thus far, COVID-19 has been a city-dwelling monster, reaving in densely populated urban areas like New York City. But the monster is on the move, and Trump's presidential campaign is scared. Quote, one former White House official said Trump's re-election campaign advisors are terrified that the coronavirus outbreak, which so far has hit largely Democratic coastal cities hardest, will soon scythe across the rural areas that remain deeply loyal to Trump, reports the Los Angeles Times. Quote, the advisors have warned Trump that the political consequences at the ballot box in November will be even worse if he is seen as too lax. Quote, pay attention, you're going to lose the election, unquote, the former official said, summarizing the intervention. So yeah, Trump remains Trump. He's the man who admitted on Monday that letting more people vote would be bad for Republicans. The man whose administration blew off pandemic warnings in September. The man who still refuses to help hospital workers who are wearing garbage bags out of alarm over their rapidly dwindling supplies of protective gear. The man whose dismissive bluster over the severity of the COVID-19 crisis allowed it to run loose upon the land. Has Trump finally had the light bulb moment the country has been waiting for? Has he, quote, grown into the office, unquote, at last? Or was yesterday's display of muted humility in the face of avoidable calamity merely a burp, like his moment of contrition after Charlottesville that didn't last a news cycle? We shall see, I suppose. It would be helpful if the President of the United States found it within himself to be coherent. There are already bodies in bags because of Trump's failures to date. If a corner has been turned, that is only a good thing, and we shall have our reckoning in the long aftermath to come. Upon this moment, our business must be protecting the health workers who are protecting the rest of us. For most of us, our business must be at home. Our business now is patience, also diligence, and soon enough, sorrow. This is an age of sudden heroes, ordinary people placed in extraordinary circumstances, who are rising to the challenge in the vivid absence of national leadership. The dying has only just begun. Quote, April is the cruelest month, unquote, wrote T.S. Eliot. The poets are too often right, says Pitt. And with that bit of poetry, I'll turn to the end of my question for tonight, my main question for tonight. And that is to say, what is the emerging pattern out of all this? Well, what you should be noting here, is that things are coming apart. They're coming apart on the medical end. They are already apart, on the medical end. This is what the Trump team is saying, is that if we do everything right, we're still going to sustain a death toll that people will most probably consider to be unacceptable. And the blame for it will be on the administration. Remember, the Democrats did not have control of Congress because they didn't have control of the Senate. They didn't have control of the presidency. They were not in control. But Donald Trump, as he was fond of telling us, was in control. So where is the buck going to stop? Everybody's going to pass it, and he's going to try to pass it back. But in spite of what the media may say, or the rich may say, Truman was right. The buck stops here. Stops at the door of the presidency. And especially a president who fiddled while Rome was burning, and because he was too stupid to see the flames. he continued to fiddle until the lives of millions of people are on the line. And even if he does everything right, it will be a disaster for the economy, and still 100 to 240,000 people are likely to die. That's the news we just heard. We also heard that 60% of the people, before the new relief bill was passed, before the new so-called stimulus bill was passed with its bailout for the rich and the corporations, before that was passed, 60% of the people believed the political system was designed solely for the elite and not for them. That number has got to be surging upward now till it reaches 70, 75%. And with it, the levels of anger and hate. And with it also the support for Medicare for all. And with it also a tremendous outcry concerning how many people are unemployed and not only don't have access to health care anymore, but are rapidly losing their access to income. Because even though the unemployment insurance is going to be more generous now, thanks to the efforts of some of the Democrats, and is going to be $600 a week more for 4 months, those 4 months are going to pass quickly. And there will be no jobs. And even if people can go back to work, say in June, or July, the way we've handled this particular crisis has made it clear that there most likely are going to be waves of crisis involved. This is probably just the first wave. It's probably going to come back in the fall because we didn't contain it quickly enough. It's probably going to come back in the fall, and the vaccine won't be ready yet. And we don't have the antivirals yet. As Fauci says, it won't be as serious in the fall, but it will be serious enough to continue the depression that the coronavirus is plunging us into. What are those 53 million folks going to do? We have an army that right now, no, I shouldn't say an army, but we have a military that right now contains what? About 1 million to 1.5 million people? Something in that range. It's not really very large. I mean, it's powerful because all of the super weapons. But if we have 53 million people out of a job and running out, of hope, and 270 million guns out there among the population, what does that actually mean? It may mean that is unfortunately.
Oh no.
Ah,
There you
okay, I'm back. So what does that mean? That happened at the most convenient time. What does that all mean? What I think it means is that, after all, April may not be the cruelest month of all for Donald Trump. The cruelest month may get here even way before November, because I don't think that 1 million people under arms are going to be able to stem the tide of all the people who are going to be totally dissatisfied at what is happening with an economy in which 53 million people are likely to be unemployed. So then the question arises, will Donald Trump not see that? Will he not see that he doesn't have the force to put down 53 million unemployed people and their relatives and their friends and their social networks? Well, I'll give this to Donald Trump. He's probably smart enough to see that he can't afford to let that happen. He can't afford to have 53 million people unemployed. So what does this mean? Well, we have a historical precedent. We have a president who was, by the way, a humanistic man. He excelled in the administration of World War I relief for hungry people over in Europe. He was a Republican, but he was considered a Republican progressive when he was elected president in 1928. His name, you may recall, was Herbert Hoover. And he was really a relatively kind man for a Republican. But he was thoroughly incapable of handling the depression that struck him, because his ideology was not one that could accommodate the fresh thinking that would allow us to meet the threat of the depression. So he fiddled and he fiddled and he fiddled. And in those times, he had 4 years to fiddle. And the whole system didn't collapse around him, though it was collapsing around everybody else. But there was time to elect a new and different president who would do something about what was happening. But in these days, we don't give our politicians that kind, of time. And besides that, really Trump, while in many ways a monster, is not such an ideologue. If he presses down on the people, it's because he doesn't like people and they're not his cronies, and that he has a cruel streak. And that's what he's about. But he also has an instinct for survival. And the balance of power here, with 53 million people who are unemployed, with no hope, will be explained to him before that happens. The kind of chaos that could occur will be explained to him before that happens. We know enough about him already to know that he will experiment. I got a message from Lana Dell today who told me she had heard from two people on Facebook that they were saying that they heard Pence and Trump said something about having a Medicare for Medicaid expansion before the other side does. They're trying to get a jump on the Democrats who haven't put forward, that is Nancy Pelosi, won't put forward a Medicare expansion because she's busy fooling around with the Affordable Care Act. So she's not going to want to do that, right? She's fiddling while Rome burns. Okay? Is Donald Trump actually going to wait for that? Kay says Bernie is our new FDR. He is. But is the country going to wait for our new FDR? Or is this president going to say to himself, look, I got to do something to improve the situation. Whatever it takes to get us out of danger, whatever it takes to keep these people at home, whatever it takes to quiet them down, whatever it takes to stop the strikes, which, by the way, I didn't have time to cover, which are spreading throughout the whole country right now. The whole country is going to be in turmoil, and he doesn't have enough troops to stop it. So there's going to be a lot of blustering, there's going to be a lot of anger, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens. But pretty soon, somebody's going to turn to Medicare for all. And somebody is going to turn to a federal job guarantee. And somebody is going to turn to spending enough money on most of us to keep us quiet. And what they've done so far is not nearly enough to make that happen. So I think the pattern that you're going to see is going to be a very surprising one. I'm not entirely clear on where that pattern is going to go, but I think we are due for an expansion of the welfare side of this. I'm sure if it comes from Trump, it's not going to be the kind of regime we like. We have to remember, Hitler pulled the Germans out of the Depression. He wasn't too proud to do that. There were all kinds of objectionable and unsavory characteristics to his regime. But he quieted the people down by spending what he had to spend and by providing an economy within which they could live. And he did that before he started the Second World War. Before he started the Second World War. And so there we are.
A lot of prisoners are being let out and no jobs.
Okay, Bonnie tells me a lot of prisoners are being let out of prison now and they have no jobs. By the way, a lot of them probably have the COVID virus too, incidentally.
Yes.
So Donald Trump was worried that the immigrants are going to spread it. We're all going to spread it. We need the CPAP devices. We need the ventilators. We need the masks. We need the hospital equipment. Every industry has to be commandeered into producing those things. And everybody has to have a job that will help the economy and help the community. And if the private sector is in no position to provide it, then the public sector is going to have to do it. And I don't know if it's going to wait until next January 21st when a new president, okay, is inaugurated. I don't know if it can wait for that. Looks like the crisis is happening too fast.
A lot of people who want food.
I don't think people are going to want to wait for that. So, I'll now consider your comments, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about this, a lot more about straws in the wind. Okay, and the emerging pattern as we go forward. So last night we spoke about how to unify and get a new Congress. We still got to do that. We got to pressure these people every single day. We got to introduce these Congress people to our reality, which is different from theirs. Our reality is unemployment.
And policy.
It's austerity. It's medical insecurity. It may soon become food insecurity the way things are going. Not food insecurity because we can't produce the food. Food insecurity because we can't get it from the farmers and distribute it. Because the distribution network may fail. Why may it fail? Because the people who run it are not providing health protections for the workers who are distributing the food. What are the strikes in Amazon about? Because stupid Bezos prefers firing people rather than giving them health care protections and hazard pay. He seems not to realize that the consequence may be not having a distribution system. His whole distribution system could collapse, and he can't foresee that. He thinks in terms of, well, if I fire them, there are lots of others who want their jobs, and there'll be more and more of them who want their jobs. There are not enough people who are going to want jobs with an appreciable risk of death at $15 an hour. You got to lower that risk of death, and you got to pay a lot more if you want people to work those jobs. So you might as well quit firing people and start giving them what they need. Otherwise, it's going to be too bad what's going to happen to your nice, pretty distribution system, Mr. Bezos. So, everybody, I see you're still here. Kay says this is a hell of a mess all the way around SMH. I try to live on next to nothing, but Social Security, at least it's something. And Russ Gorman says Congress is on vacation. They were stressed out. They're not all on vacation. The Senate isn't in session. The House is in session. Kay says, not near as much as we're stressed out, Russell. Yeah, they got a lot more money, so they're not near as stressed out. And Kay says, I saw there was a big rent strike in L.A. today. Don't blame them a bit and hope it helps people wake up. Yeah, they want a moratorium on the rent. It's not that the rent is too damn high. It's that the rent is there, but people's jobs are not. And Barbara said, seriously? And Kay said, we old and poor are expendable, and the sooner the better, in his opinion. Kay says, AARP is fighting that, I think. Yeah, AARP is not that influential anymore. If seniors really paid attention to the facts, they would all vote for Bernie. Yeah, they would. Yeah, they would. But, seniors are very preoccupied with just staying alive. When people get into their 80s, you'd be surprised how many people are preoccupied just with staying alive.
They don't have computers.
They either don't have computers or don't know how to use them. They're dealing with smartphones. In a lot of cases, don't really know how to use the smartphones. They still watch the mainstream cable crap. They don't know anything about the alternative media, unless evidently it's right-wing alternative media. Lana says, I am glad Bernie is still in the race. And Whoopi Goldberg is a jerk. I used to like her. Yes, everybody used to like her, especially since she played the Guinan in Star Trek. But she is a jerk. Yeah, she is absolutely a jerk. Okay, and Lana says, I think we're going to do this until July. Yeah, maybe till people focus their minds on the coming election. And Teresa says, the whole panel on The View are jerks. Yeah, they are. It's a qualification for being on The View that you're a jerk. Kay says, Whoopi is sure bought and paid for now and has been for years. I had to stop watching that show years ago and I used to like it. And Lana says, a limo liberal if there ever was one. She's not a liberal. Not a liberal.
Limo, she said.
Yeah, she's a limo. But she's not a liberal. A 1960s liberal is to the left of where most of us in the progressive movement are now. Some people like the Newbergers from Oregon, and Wayne Morse. Even Senator Humphrey, before he became the Vice President of the United States. I mean, he was near a socialist. At least as socialistic as Bernie Sanders is now. Okay, and J.K. Galbraith, Jamie Galbraith's father, as late as 1972, admitted he was an out-and-out socialist. Okay, says Stark County, Ohio, the Canton area. The Canton Bulldogs, where I am stuck again now, is a redneck mess. SMH. The Canton Bulldogs were a pro football team.
Oh, yeah?
In like the 1920s and 1930s, and their main star was Jim Thorpe.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
They were really
big
something.
guy.
Yeah, the big guy. The trailer park where I'm living now has 0 people of any color except white. Kay says, I'm thinking control of the Senate is more important than the president, okay, at this point. Now we need control of the Senate and control of the presidency too. And control of the House. We need all 3 branches, and we need a lot more progressives. Steve says, yeah, Whoopi is a bitch. And Kay says, hey, Sandy. And Sandy says, hi, Kay. And Lana says, the pitchforks are coming. Kay says, I hope so, Lana. Lana says, a worthless centrist. Susan Eldridge, how was FDR able to do what he did with the New Deal? He was able to do what he did with the New Deal because people were scared, and he wasn't. Or if he was scared, he hid it extremely well because he was an individual who projected supreme confidence, okay, and joy.
And well.
No, I mean, by today's standards, he wasn't that wealthy.
No, but then was.
Yes, he was. Yeah. He was wealthy, but he wasn't really projecting wealth. He was projecting care, and he was projecting confidence, and he was projecting what he thought was the spirit of America. And there had been another Roosevelt who was president of the United States, and he was FDR's cousin, and he had been a damn good president up to that time, too. And so people had some confidence. But the way he was able to do it was he had a few people who got elected who were pretty radical for the time. And he had some radical people in his brain trust at that time who were radical in their experimentation. Some of them were pretty close to socialists, but some of them were just extreme Democrats, Tom Paine, adherents. Some were very big exponents, of the planned economy. But his brain trust was aptly named. They were brains of that time. They were smart, and they were willing to experiment. And they generated new idea after new idea, and new bill after new bill. And FDR had big majorities in 1933. And he increased, when the 1934 election came around, he increased his majorities. And while it seemed like he was threatened in 1936, he went way to the left in 1936. And he had his biggest victory of all and increased his majorities even more in 1936. And of course, the people who won as part of the presidential party, running as FDR Democrats, of course, had to be his creatures. The only opposition within the Democratic Party came from the Southern Democrats. Many of them were more conservative and, of course, really reactionary when it came to race. But some of the Southern Democrats were fairly populist when it came to economics and hatred of the banks and the corporations. So he could put through bills that were anti-Wall Street and that could shackle Wall Street. And those were among the most effective part of his reforms and his administration. And he had a bunch of people who came from urban areas who were very pro-labor and who wanted to build up the labor movement, and the labor unions. And they helped. And they were in Congress too. And that's how he did it. He did it with presidential power and with a presidential party in Congress that owed their loyalty to him. If you think that Trump could command the votes, of the Republicans now, that doesn't compare with the hold that FDR had over the Democrats in 1933, 1934, 1935, 1936. His hold didn't begin to loosen a little until 1937, when he felt it was necessary to compromise with the conservatives on the budget. But for the first part of his presidency, oh boy. And then for the last part, of when the war came, during those times there was no opposing FDR. He was able to mobilize the whole economy in service of the war. Sandy said, I heard this is going to go on for at least 2 years, maybe in one form or another, not the complete shutting down of the economy, but what's likely to happen is the virus shutting down parts of the economy in waves as we suppress it. And then, it comes again, and then we suppress it again. It's not as serious the second time. And it comes a third time, And each time, a smaller part of the economy has to go off. But yeah, it's probably going to come, in waves until we develop a sufficient number of people that are immune, that most people you come into contact with are not going to be spreading a disease any further. And if you take, some normal precautions, the rate at which people contract the virus will go down. And then it's also possible that even though they're talking 12 to 18 months from the vaccine, from when they started talking in February, it may be they'll be able to speed that up, to November, okay, or December, to start to use the vaccine. And then that's going to help, okay, a good deal. And we still haven't seen the antivirals, but they can't be far away. I don't hold a lot of store that chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine combined with, okay, an antibiotic. I don't hold a lot of hope that that's going to be that important or that successful, because it's said that there are difficult side effects for some, okay, in that. But probably remdesivir may prove to be very, very useful, okay, as an antiviral, cutting way back on the fatality rate and producing people who continue to live and who have immunity to the virus. So that may take, okay, a lot of the pressure up, but it's going to be wild. Case says, Susan, people were fed up and in the streets at that point, I think. Kay said, Bernie is on new FDR. I wish people would get a grip. I wish people would get a grip. I wish they could see that. I wish they could read some history. I wish they could see the parallels between FDR and Bernie Sanders, because he really is the new FDR. He will do everything that FDR did and then some. He will build on what FDR is. And he will produce a much happier country and a much more equal country and a much more decent country to live in, a much more compassionate country. Kay says, my grandma came to this country when she married my grandpa in 1901. She was honest to God German, caravan riding gypsy in what she called Austria-Hungary. Turns out some of my grandparents came from Austria-Hungary too. The Hungary part of it, actually Ruthenia in the Carpathian Ukraine. And the other grandparents came from Poland, very close to Warsaw. And Kay said, Nazis went after the gypsies first. Yes, they did go after the gypsies first. They hated the gypsies. I have no idea why. I guess they were just a convenient scapegoat for the damn Nazis. Lana said, I really appreciate the truckers. I do too. I appreciate the grocery workers. I appreciate the truckers. I appreciate the postman. I mean, I appreciate all the people who are out there literally risking their well-being to do what they have to do what they have to do for the rest of the community. And given that I know, and many of you know, that we can create our money at will, we need hazard pay for them, for those who are out there. We can produce whatever hazard pay they need, and we need to do that. Teresa Sanders says, movement for a People's Party. Absolutely. And Lana says, Humphrey Terminal and MSP Airport at the Minneapolis Airport. But you know, the Humphrey Democrats, the Humphrey McCarthy Freeman Democrats in the 1960s, okay, and the 1970s were really terrific people. I worked on a federal project in the latter part of the 1970s, which involved some people coming to Washington for sessions I ran, okay, or helped to run, and but also, okay, I went to Minneapolis on a few occasions to hold some meetings with them there. And we met them for lunches in Washington, okay, a number of times as well. And they were really terrific people. Really terrific people. I don't know what happened to Minnesota politics since then, but it has grossly deteriorated. I know there have been great politicians in Minnesota since that time too, but Wellstone, for example, but Paul Wellstone. But Crazy Paul developed a belief in balanced budgets, which greatly affected his effectiveness, okay, in Congress. Damn that guy. I mean, you know, he shared these neoliberal assumptions. You know, he came out of SDS in the 1960s. Actually, we both came out of SDS, but I was a little earlier than he was. So I still retained a New Deal sort of framework. His framework was shaped by I'm afraid, individualistic hippie thinking during the 1960s and the early 1970s. Susan Eldridge says, Galbraith did a podcast with Michael Moore. Jamie has some good ideas for how to survive this crisis. Jamie Galbraith, you mean, not John Kenneth Galbraith. I was earlier referring to John Kenneth Galbraith in 1972, saying openly that he was a socialist. Jamie's father, of course. And Steve said FDR's wife was very cool as well. FDR's wife, when it came to policy, was cooler than FDR. When it came to policy and when it came to people, she was cooler than FDR. But when it came to politics, when it came to being a politician, there was nobody like FDR, and there hasn't been anybody since. Not Trump, okay, and not Reagan. Nobody was like FDR. You got to read about him. It's amazing, just amazing. Lana says, Henry Wallace was a good man. He was. It was a real tragedy when the Democrats turned away from him and turned towards Harry Truman. If Henry Wallace had become the president, okay, when Roosevelt died, the whole history of the Cold War might have been very, very different. The whole of modern history might have been very, very different. Steve Wolfbrand said, FDR rebuilt or built the infrastructure, TVA, the Hoover Dam, WPA, you bet. I know. Many things in the Washington area. Right around here, the roads we still ride on. The monuments we go to see. The parks around this area. All FDR. Susan Eldridge says, I don't think FDR would be successful today. Well, maybe not FDR personally, but if Bernie Sanders gets into the White House with a majority in both houses of Congress, he's going to be very successful today. I don't know whether he's going to be able to hang in there politically and physically as long, okay, as FDR did. We have to remember, okay, FDR was the president for 12 years. But I think if Bernie can last 4 years in the presidency, it's going to be a whirlwind 4 years. And he's going to get amazing things done. Steve said, Henry Wallace would have changed history. They Bernied him. Yeah, they Bernied him by about 30 seconds by stopping a guy by the name of Red Pepper, actually Claude Pepper, from getting to the microphone at the convention
in 1944. If Pepper had made it to the microphone and stopped them getting a recess of that particular session, then probably a floor demonstration would have swept Wallace into the nomination over the opposition of the Southern Democrats. By the way, Pepper, the redhead who was known, as Red Pepper, but not because of the color of his hair entirely, but because he was a Southern populist from Florida who was the senator there for a very long time, well into the 60s, as I recall, but was never so radical again as he was in 1944. Anyway, Red Pepper almost got the nomination for Wallace. The story goes that if he'd been able to hang in on charging for the microphone for 30 more seconds, he would have had it, and Wallace would have had the nomination, the Democratic Party in 1944, and surely would have beaten Tom Dewey then, because he was very popular as a vice president. Sandy Deck says they don't spend a lot of time on history in schools anymore. No, they don't. It's too bad. History is really fascinating, and it's full of the kinds of stories I just told you. Anyway, a vaccine against an ever-changing virus is a tall order. Witness the common cold. And witness the flu. It's a tall order, but it can be done. Steve says, wear masks in public, not to protect you, but to protect the others. I know everybody's coming to that conclusion. As soon as we can get a hold of the masks, we're going to wear them. Sandy says, my son's boss is giving them an extra $2 an hour for working during the crisis. Well, that's good, but at 40 hours a week, that's an extra $80 a week. That's not exactly time and a half, is it? And Lana says, yeah, the DFL took over, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. Yes, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party took over. But then the Democratic Farmer Labor Party stopped actually delivering for the people of Minnesota because they got neoliberalized. And Lana says, then we had Jesse Ventura. And who did Jesse Ventura beat for the governorship, of Minnesota? One of the guys he beat was Hubert Humphrey's son, if I recall correctly. Or maybe his grandson. I forgot now whether it was his son or his grandson, but I think it was his son. His by then 55-year-old son or something like that. And Kathy said, nice to hear Bonnie giggling in the background. Oh, thanks, Kathy. She's sitting right here next to me. At this point, Lana says, I don't think Trump ever wanted to be a VP or president. No, not when he started out. He really didn't want to. I think he just wanted to get some perks for his businesses along the way. He just wanted to make some sweet deals. But I think now that he sees how rich his family can get in the presidency because the Republicans refuse to impeach him, I think he feels differently about it now. In fact, he's committed so many crimes that are now likely to be prosecuted in New York State that he probably feels he has to be president for life so they can't prosecute him. Actually, they could prosecute him, but of course the Republicans would have to impeach him first. Or sit still for the impeachment. Go through with the conviction, I'll be precise. Steve says, when I was a kid, we had framed portraits of FDR and JFK on the walls of the house. What a different world that was. Yes, it was a different world. That was before the freaking neoliberals. Steve says, they faked a fire drill at the convention to stop Henry Wallace. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they called a recess supposedly because there was a fire drill. Sandy said, "No, it's not." And then she said, "Bonnie." Kay says, "Well, I'm out of here tonight. Please stay well and safe all, and we'll talk soon. Thank you for the discussion." Lana said, "No, not Trump. Harry Truman." Sandy says, "I'm surprised that Trump doesn't run for the hills. I don't think he's scared enough, Sandy." Well, I think that brings me to the end of the comments, except Steve Voltbrand says, "Doc, I got a couple of N95s I can send you for you and Bonnie if you want to DM me the address." Thank you, Steve. I'd be really happy to get them. I really would be. So thank you. I will DM you the address. N95 is fantastic. And Steve says good night. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Stay well.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. And Bonnie says, stay well. And we'll see you next time, which will be tomorrow night. That's not that long to wait, I hope. See you then. Good night.